Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up from March 27th through April 2nd. This week I read 2 books, I watched 5 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 1 book. I just started new allergy medication because the old stuff wasn't cutting it, and I'm really hoping it works because everything in this region hurts right now and I hate it. First this week, let's talk about the longest romance novel that I've ever personally read, and that's The Gamble by Kristen Ashley. This book is 629 pages, which is much longer than any other romance book that I've read. At least I've read other books that have romance in them as subgenres that are this long or longer, but this one is a romance but then also a mystery thriller. This one has to do with Nina. She's from America, but she lives in the UK, and she currently knows that she needs to take a little bit of a break from the relationship that she's currently in. She's engaged, but she has some feelings about how it's going, so she's decided to go to a small town in the middle of Colorado, rent an A-frame in the mountains, and just be by herself for 2 weeks. However, after traveling for 17 hours to get there, feeling like she's coming down with a cold, she gets there and the owner says, "There's a scheduling error. I'm here right now, which means that you can't be here, so all of your stuff will be refunded, but you need to go somewhere else." And she had her heart set on this place. It's gorgeous. She doesn't want to just spend 2 weeks in a dingy hotel that doesn't have a kitchen. She's got all this food with her, but she's like, "Fine, you don't want me here. I'm leaving. I don't care that I have a cold." And he's like, "Wait, you've got a cold?" And things happen where he ends up having to take care of her, and then of course this progresses into our romance. On the side of all of this, eventually we find out that there's also been a murder in town, and we have to figure out how and why that happened. Although I ended up liking these 2 people as a couple, he really needs to learn boundaries, and it was just so grating to read every time she said no and he kept doing what he was doing. It was not a thing that I wanted to keep reading, and yet here we were. Stereotypical masculinity things aside, I ended up really enjoying this. Apparently it's also the first in a series, so I would be interested to continue checking these books out. However, I don't know if my library actually has them, so we'll see if that actually happens. This week I also read The Most Dazzling Girl in Berlin by Kip Wilson. This is a historical fiction novel written in poetry, so it was very quick to get through, and that's something about Kip Wilson's writing that I forgot. I have read something else, I'm pretty sure, by this author, and was actually surprised to find that it was an entire book written in poetry, because what little I knew about that book, I didn't know it was poetry, and the same with this one actually. All I saw was, "If you're a fan of cabaret," and I was like, I want it. This book is about a girl in 1930s Berlin who ages out of living in the orphanage and therefore has to find somewhere else to live. And as she's trying to find a job, a lot of the population of Berlin is without a job, so everybody is vying for the jobs together, and she ends up eventually stumbling into a job, but it takes quite a while, and that job is at a queer nightclub. There she falls for the titular character as well as grows very close to the other people that work at the nightclub. However, there are political things going on in Berlin at this point, so obviously being in a queer nightclub is something that is going to become very dangerous as time progresses. I thought this was done pretty well, and it made me miss my vaudeville venue that I used to go to all the time before all the things that are happening in the world. On to what I watched this week, the first thing being a couple of episodes of Coroner. I'm in the 4th season, which is the season that's currently airing, and there is an app that we got on our new smart TV that lets us watch this season, which is not on Netflix because the season is ongoing. If you're not familiar, it is a medical drama-based show that centers a coroner, and it takes place in Ontario, which makes me love it even more because occasionally there are Canadian actors in it that I'm like, wait, that person. And not that that's actually happened with this show before, but sometimes it happens with things that are shot in Canada, and then I'm like, wait, hey, that person, I know this person. This is a person I don't actually know personally, but if you've watched any of the Explaining the Pandemic to My Previous Self videos, that woman was on an episode, and I was like, wait, I know her, and I had to double check it was her. The same episode she was in also featured a drag queen, so obviously I enjoyed that. However, this episode ended in a way where I'm just like, okay, what's going to happen? Because we only have 2 episodes left in the season, and I want to know some things. This is not a good time for our main character. There's never really a good time for our main character. She goes through a lot. Because I'm on a true crime kick, I also watched the 4-part miniseries, The Oland Murder. This is about a murder that took place in New Brunswick, where a father who is the head of a company was murdered, and everybody figures his son did it. His son actually was convicted, went to jail, and then there was a mistrial, and that's what this whole series is all about, is whether or not they had enough evidence to do what they did, the mistrial, the new trial, all of those those types of things. This is a fairly recent case, so if you're in the Maritimes, you've probably heard of it before, but it didn't actually make it all the way over to my ears in BC. Again though, I get this pleasure even if I'm watching something like true crime where I'm like, oh, that place, I've actually been to that place. We actually stopped to get our oil changed in that place on the road trip that we just did. I also finally got to visit my best friend this week, which means we caught up on The Gilded Age. We finished the first season. We got to the end of the 9th episode and I was like, this really feels like a season finale, and we looked it up and it was. Okay, good. 9 is a weird amount of episodes, but we're in a weird amount of episodes type of time where if you're streaming, you can make however many episodes you want for your show. It doesn't have to fit into whatever a network wants. It's hard to talk about a certain thing that happens without spoiling it for other people, but a character was going to do a thing and then was blocked from doing that thing, and me and my best friend were basically like, we're actually kind of okay with that because we want this character to do this other thing, and maybe that will happen in the second season. Extremely vague. Since we were right there, we also continued on her rewatch and my first time watch of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, so the 4th, 5th, and 6th episodes, and this show is great. I really just love these characters and how they interact, and I'm going to be very interested to see what happens when her father confronts her about the fact that she has criminal convictions, which is something that happened a little bit earlier in the show, and I'm going to be pissed if it makes it so he doesn't get his dream job, because that shouldn't matter. Also, there was a character that showed up for a couple of these episodes that I was like, I've seen that guy before. Who is that guy? And I kind of looked him up and I was like, okay, yeah, he was the graffiti artist in Ghostbusters, but like, why does he look so familiar? He has been in a bunch of things, but I think it comes down to the fact that he's Rob Corddry's brother, Nathan, and that's probably why he looks so familiar, but I don't actually know for sure. I just looked through the IMDb and went, okay, yeah, this is the only thing that I was like, yes, that guy looks familiar when I was watching Ghostbusters, and I didn't look it up then because I didn't care. The thing that I can also really appreciate about this section of this show is how she has bombed really hard while she's been on stage. It's not that easy to just write some jokes, go on stage, and perform them. You have to actually hone your craft before doing that, and sometimes you'll bomb anyway, especially if you don't know your audience, which was definitely a fault of one of the reasons she was bombing. Speaking of bombing, I also watched the current episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, where they were doing a roast of Ross Matthews, and some of them were not good at this. Which is fair. Like I said, it is an acquired skill. You have to figure out what jokes to tell, how to tell them, make sure they're not going too far, make sure they're not being super offensive in a way you didn't even mean for them to be offensive. And although this is a season that seems like it's never going to end, this episode made it feel like it's getting very close to the finale. And the result of the lip sync was exactly what I wanted to happen. The movie we watched this week was The Game, and if you still play the game, I'm really sorry that you just lost it. I never actually played it, but I was around a lot of people that did, and that was quite a thing. Oh god, probably 10 to 15 years ago. Anyway, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can look it up later. It's not that interesting. The Game, starring Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, is a movie about a man who seems to have it all, except for he's kind of lonely. And on his 48th birthday, he ends up having lunch with his brother, who gives him this gift. Except for it's a gift where you're like, I don't really know what this is. And he's like, just call the number, they'll set it up for you. He ends up finishing a business meeting and realizing that the office for this thing is right in that building, so he goes up there and he goes through all of these different personality tests and physical and all of these different things, and he still really doesn't understand what the game is. What is this thing his brother has paid for him to do? So when a series of weird things start happening, he has to figure that it is the game and he needs to play it to completion, except for he doesn't know if the game is real or not. I had never heard of this before. We ended up watching it because Chad had watched it many, many years ago, and it was actually referenced in an episode of Upload, which is something we watched recently. So when it was referenced and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about, Chad was like, we have to watch this. And okay, yes, it does have its twists and its turns, and there's that aspect of it, but there's also so much more to talk about when it comes down to exactly what happens in this. There were things at the ending that I just did not appreciate, and as soon as the credits rolled, I turned to Chad and went, don't get this for me for my birthday. I don't want this. My birthday, of course, being on the 13th of this month, which means that this was actually a timely exchange. On to the book I listened to this week, which was Let Me Hear a Rhyme by Tiffany D. Jackson. Following the murder of their friend Steph, two best friends as well as his younger sister band together to try to get him a contract for his music career, which is difficult because the artist is already deceased. However, he left behind a treasure trove of songs in shoeboxes under his bed, so they figure they can cut these together into some albums, see if they can get some people interested, and all of a sudden people all over town are playing his songs. The younger sister does this because she figures she can take her cut of the money of selling these albums and actually hire a private detective to find out what happened to her brother. However, her mother seems really determined to shut her down every time she talks about trying to figure out what happened, and it kind of gets down to a point where she has a limited time frame to figure it out before her mother's just going to shut her down completely. I like that we got these 3 different perspective characters who are all played by different voice actors, but then we also got this flashback perspective to Steph himself, and that was really great to see because we really got to see his passion instead of just hearing his friends talk about how passionate he was about music. Overall, I've enjoyed everything I've ever read by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this was no exception. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!